Hi, I'm Nicholas Burtner with School of Permaculture, and here I am again with my buddy Loren. What's up, brother?
How are you?
Amazing, amazingness. So that's what I just love. You know, he plays better air guitar, I think, than anybody in California. on record.
A lot of practice.
It shows. It shows.
Thanks.
Yeah. So look, I'm just going to hand this over to Loren. We're going to talk about Mediterranean tree guilds, and brother, just go.
Sweet. So one of my favorite tree species, or I should say genera, for Mediterranean climate is a mulberry. This here is an Oscar mulberry, which I took cuttings. I didn't really take cuttings. I pruned the trees and then I used the stakes to mark a vegetable row that was here when we were establishing this garden. And this one sprouted. So I used the prunings to mark the carrot row, and in hopes that one would take. And so this was just stuck in the ground, literally as a stick, about 6 or 7 years ago. And if you could see, it puts out about, I mean, this is not even halfway through the season, and it's grown a solid 6-8 feet with basically very little irrigation. It's, I would say, it's strategic total utter neglect. So the mulberry tree is one of the most underrated trees in my opinion because it has so many uses besides the fruit. Obviously the fruit is incredibly delicious, but you can also eat the leaves. The young leaves are totally edible. Old leaves might get a little toxic, but depends on who you talk to. Also depends on the species. This is a Morus alba. There's two other species that are common, Morus nigra and Morus rubra. Morus nigra is native to Asia, and the rubra is native to the eastern U.S. So they're pretty much pan global, and mostly in the temperate regions and going towards the Mediterranean and subtropical regions. The nigra can handle, rubra can handle the most frost. Alba and nigra are a little bit frost tender, so they can't really handle much below about 15 or 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
I'd say it's the hardiest of all fruit trees, really. It can almost go to the polar region, almost.
Yeah, the rubra is extremely hardy. The other good thing about it is you can coppice it and still have fruit every year because it fruits on new wood. And the leaves and foliage are they're really good forage for animals. They're about 14 to 18% protein and about 70 to 80% digestible. So it's one of the best animal fodders that there is. So this is, the tip is to use these trees as guidelines, as markers, stake them in, and just forget about it. If you want to keep the tree, you like where it is, keep it. Otherwise you can just pack it back, feed it to your goats, and replant the stakes. And so it's an extremely versatile tree that's totally hardy. So here again, we're experimenting with all sorts of different plants, and we're basically trying to figure out what'll survive in this climate with very little care.
Let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
That's a very important tip. He just kind of went over real quick. Not every time, actually the majority of the time, you're not going to know what to put in the ground. So it is, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is all experimentation. I mean, most of us are pushing the edge. We're trying new things. And so it's these happy successes that work out that we love to share with each other, so we can all basically push each other further along the path.
And plenty of mistakes too.
Plenty of mistakes, for sure. So this here is a Pakistani mulberry, which is one of my personal favorites. It has like a 3 or 4 inch long fruit, which is, in my opinion, one of the best fruits in the world. And as you can see, extremely vigorous. This tree has been pruned very heavily back to about 8 feet, and it's grown about 6 or 8 feet so far this season. Now, what we've got here also are some grapes that there's some anecdotal information that grapes and mulberries are really good companions. So in some areas they say they grow the grapes on the mulberry trunks as trellises. They use the mulberries as trellises. So here we're kind of trying to do that. We've got the grapes on a fence here, but they're also intermingling with the tree, and their root zone is totally intermingled. And then as an understory, which is kind of, you can't really see, we've got some irises down in here. So we've really only got like a 3-layer food forest going on this little section. But then if you keep coming along, behind here, we've got a pineapple guava. which is one of my personal favorite fall fruits in the guava family. They actually changed the genus from Feijoa to Acca, A-C-C-A, Acca celowiana. So this one, it has amazing flowers that you can eat the petals from, and don't take the whole unripe fruit off or you won't get fruit. But the petals, the white flower petals, are extremely delicious. And these trees get, these bushes, these shrubs I should say, get very little irrigation. So they're well established. They handle, I mean, we get about, this last 3 years we've gotten on average about 8 inches a year. So we're about half of our average. So we're about 3 years into a historic drought in California. And as you can see, these plants are still thriving. I can't tell you exactly how much water they're getting, but I can tell you that they're not getting that much.
Yeah, this is pretty much a strategic, total utter neglect site.
That's right.
And but they're doing wonderful here on the north side of this mulberry.
Yeah, it's technically the west side, but yeah,
okay.
It's shaded right now, and it's kind of the second layer of this food forest, with the mulberry being the over canopy, the overstory, the grapes being the vine layer, the mulberry, or I'm sorry, the Feijoa being the shrub layer, and the iris as an herb layer. And then we also threw in some olives here because the point of these plantings here really is to shelter the garden as well as provide food for ourselves, because luckily today it's not, but it gets really windy here. I mean, hurricane force winds here. We're on the Gaviota coast, and we'll get 60, 70 mile an hour winds quite commonly, especially in the summertime. So we get these crazy desiccating winds. So these trees here, as you can see, are planted right on the outside of the fence line with the idea to shelter the vegetable garden in here. So we've tried olives as well, and we just tried this guild, olives and pineapple guavas. And so the whole fence line, as you go down, is planted with olives and pineapple guavas, and I think they seem to be working pretty well together.
Those look really healthy.
They look really healthy, yeah. Well, I guess you can see this guava's kind of getting shaded out. So again, it was an experiment. Let's see what works. If we pruned, maybe that would get a little more light. I think it's probably more a light issue than a competition issue, but yeah. Olives are obviously a no-brainer for this climate. And then I think we'll just walk right back over here.
Yeah.
Actually, hang on, cut. I think we'll just walk over here.
Love it, yeah.
Let's go check out, because I can show all the people.
Careful here.
So here we have one of my other favorites, Serratonia siliqua, Carob. Now, this tree is totally bomb-proof, especially in this climate. I mean, you cannot pick a hardier plant for this situation. These plants were in 5-gallon cans in the nursery, and they totally rooted into the ground, and they basically had all their roots completely severed because we were like, hey, we got to get them out of here. And literally went through incredible amount of shock, and as you can see, everyone but one made it. And so these have been in the ground probably about 5 years, very little irrigation again. And one thing you should know about Carob is there's male and female trees. So this here is the female tree with the pods, but here we have the male tree, which is actually flowering right now. So this is, you don't usually see, and there's a bee on it. So you can see the flowers born on the stem. And so you generally don't see this, but you do need to have male and female in order to get proper fruit set. So they're dioecious, meaning that there's two, the sex is only on one tree. So know that you need to have some male carobs in order to get the female pods. And obviously these are used for confectionery. They're a chocolate substitute. It's high protein, great cattle forage, animal forage. I think there might be some toxicity with the seed. It might be, you probably won't want to overload your animals with it. So what we're experimenting with also, as well as growing fruit for our human consumption, is fodder, especially late season fodder. Because in California, we're challenged with having grass finished beef because it's so dry in the summer. And most of the animals are finished at the end of the season. So what we're trying to do here is promote and demonstrate these alternative forages, these perennial forages and late season forages that are going to provide high protein, high nutrition at the end of the season when everything else is totally dry and there's no other forage for animals.
That's great.
So integrating these into the paddocks, contour strip forests with basically like a silvopasture or agroforestry system. So these are, again, experimental plantings to try to see what's going to work.
Super rad.
So Carob's the second, third, fourth member. Now over here, some other trees we experimented with that really aren't really talked about much in permaculture circles that I know of. But we've got this white sapote, Casamaroa edulis, and also the loquat, Areobatria japonica. And those two trees have really surprised me. The hardiness of those, it just blows me away. I mean, as you can see, we've had some losses, but that's because they're literally not. I mean, there's a lot going on here. The family here has a lot of projects going on.
Really what it shows is the resiliency of the trees in this
The
climate.
resiliency of the trees, basically getting enough care to just make it. So that's we're kind of growing things hard here. So
And it's almost like you get a lot of water, you get a lot of harvest. You get less water, you get taste.
That's
get
right.
flavor.
Yeah, you get more nutrient dense. So the loquat and the sapote have really impressed me with the drought tolerance. The sapote being, it's a subtropical tree, and you would think, hey, this needs water to survive. It'll handle water and it'll take it, sure, but it doesn't need it, obviously.
Hey.
And we got one more tree.
Let's do it. Where we going?
Over here. This is actually Leucaena leucocephala, wahe. So it's in the mimosa family. You can see the round flowers are characteristic of a mimosa family. But this is one I think is also, in my opinion, much more realistic for this climate than Tagasaste. And Tagasaste is kind of like the grand all be all nitrogen fixer. Oh, Tagasaste! But it does not grow here. It will not survive. One, it's not moist enough. Two, we get oak moths, which completely decimate it.
Ooh.
I might be able to show some Tagasaste trees in a little bit, but this here, Leucaena leucocephala, also known as wahe, or some people pronounce it leukemia. I think it's pronounced Leucaena, but this is wahe, and it's a nitrogen fixer. It's in the mimosa family, and the unripe seeds are edible.
Oh, really?
And they're kind of good. Try them.
Now, we are in California, so if I start running around and hallucinating, I've got it on film.
Everybody's going to want to come out.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. They got like this.
As you can see, we've got the loquats planted underneath it, so it provides a little bit of shelter from this really strong wind, a little bit of shade, some nitrogen fixation, and they obviously play together well. So
since it's not long lived, sacrifice it, cut it down, make it a structure like these guys.
That's
are doing
right.
here.
Yeah, it's after about 10 or 12 years, it might die. It kind of exhausts itself because it's so prolific. And then the loquats will take over because they'll live 30, 40 years.
Oh man, this is great stuff, Loren. This is good. I don't want this session to end. Where else are we going after this?
Okay, well, they got to shut off the cameras. Let's go.